All right, we're getting close to or past 12 o'clock, so we'll just get started slowly. I will let you know that there's over 200 people registered for this event, which to me is a sign of how important it is and how it's on a lot of our minds in our work, and just the implications or impact that it could have in the classroom, in our work, and kind of as a society at large when we're using it every day on Google. Um, I want to introduce myself first. My name is Elise Mueller, and I am a consultant, a learning consultant in Duke Learning Innovation. I've been tasked with leading the AI events for my department. I think this is our third or fourth event, and we will have a couple more this semester. We're writing blog posts. We have a page about AI, and I'm so glad that Hannah Roser has agreed to come and talk to us about AI and research. She's a great fit because she already works with students on digital literacy, and also is very interested in this topic in general as well. I'll be here monitoring the chat. Hannah may not have time to take questions, but I'm going to be gathering as much as I can. And if we can't do it live, then maybe in the email afterwards with the recording and the slides, we can put a little information that's left over as far as questions go. I encourage you to reach out to either of us if you want to talk about any of these issues in more detail. I think that's all I have to ramble on about. Hannah, do you want to go ahead and get started?
Yeah, thanks, Elise. You can see my screen here with the Kermit meme. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming. I know it's Monday, but hopefully you're getting some lunch in and learning something today about ChatGPT. So as Elise mentioned, I'm a research librarian for biological sciences and global health here at Duke. And I'm really excited about this topic. In fact, I talk to everyone I know about it. So it's really fun to be able to share what I've learned with you today. So if you have questions or comments, do please put them in the chat, and we hope to be able to look at those towards the end. So just kind of the game plan for today is to look under the hood of ChatGPT as much as we can, which we can't do entirely, and think about what sources that ChatGPT is trained on. And then we'll look a little bit or think a little bit about some scenarios, some use cases for how students or researchers more broadly might use ChatGPT for research. And we'll talk about some AI ethics. We're planning to cover a lot today. Just thinking about what some of the harms and benefits are of using this tool for research specifically. And then I'll wrap up with some ways for keeping up with AI developments. And I have a list of real citations I'll share with you that have been the basis of my learning about ChatGPT. Just a little bit about me. I'm a librarian. I've been at Duke for over 10 years, and I come to the ChatGPT conversation thinking about how students and researchers are going to use this thing to find information. And as soon as I started playing with it myself, I thought they are going to use it. They already are, and I've been talking to a lot of students about that. There's a lot of conversations around how it's being used in writing, and that's really its strength, but I think it's worth talking about how people might use it as a search engine or kind of their new research assistant. So to add to this, a few weeks ago, as I started learning about it, we started to get some of our first requests from patrons to Duke libraries for citations that didn't exist. Nobody could find them. We were seeing it like 3 different totally separate people had contact us on a Monday for these, we believe, ChatGPT generated citations. So it really kind of highlighted that this is something we need to be aware of and learn as much as we can about. In addition to my work as a librarian, I have co-taught a class for the past 4 years an undergraduate course in information science and studies here at Duke with my colleague, Linda Daniel. The course is titled The Googleization of Knowledge, and we explore the impact of the internet on society, kind of in a nutshell. And I was thinking about how if ChatGPT had rolled out a little earlier this fall, we might have renamed the course to the ChatGPTization of knowledge, because I think it's really kind of taken the world by storm and is really interesting. So I did want to just take a moment, if you don't mind, or if you would be willing to share. I created this poll, let's see. And I just want to ask people where they're coming from today. So that could be your department, your university, the type of research or job area that you're coming from. So hopefully this little poll is working, but for those of you able to access that, you can just stick in a comment there about where you're coming from today.
I put the link to the poll is in chat.
Yeah.
And folks are also adding to chat itself.
Okay. Cool. Is it working? I was like, oh, it's not working. Okay, so poll fail, but I just want to mention that, like, as we saw who registered for this session, there's people from all over Duke, people in on the medical side, on the you know, professional school side, lots of library folks and people from different universities. So appreciate y'all coming. I think it's really speaks to how much an impact this tool is having, because everybody is talking about it and thinking about its impacts. So I'll move on there. So thank you. So I just wanted to say that for me, it was helpful to think about ChatGPT and what comes before it. So what are the tools that have been used for information search before ChatGPT? And I was thinking about stone tablets in 3000 BCE being our source of information. Then fast forward a whole lot to the mid 90s, and we had access to better and better search engines like Google for finding the increasingly digitized Internet of Things. And then Wikipedia being a obviously huge important source of encyclopedic knowledge in the early 2000s. And then we had Google really putting a lot into sort of carving out the scholarly web with their Google search engine, as well as their Google Books project. I started working in libraries in about 2005 at Northwestern. And I remember Google going around and digitizing libraries. And I thought to myself, this is going to be like a really interesting area that you could keyword search across the entire contents of libraries worldwide. And so I think that's kind of an important context for where we're going. So fast forward to today, 2023, I think we're maybe feeling like the Simpsons news anchor, Kent Brockman, accepting AI as our overlord. It's been the talk of the town. It was released in November of 2022, but just in the last couple months, it's really come up with a lot of attention. And then, of course, very recently, Google's Bard AI and the Microsoft Bing AI have been right on the heels of ChatGPT. So we've come a long way, and it's really interesting to see how rapid a rollout we've had with these other tools. So I wanted to mention that most of us know the basics. Some of you know way more. I know there are folks from computer science or in IT fields that really understand the technology. But just to kind of baseline knowledge for us, ChatGPT is an AI large language model from OpenAI, and it's been trained on what we've heard is a massive trove of internet-based text. And the model is trained to have human-like conversations with the user based on the user's prompts. I personally didn't really get like get the significance of this until I started using it about a month ago. And as soon as I did, I was totally hooked, and could see like many different possible applications for it. And it really got me wondering, like, what is this trained on? Where is it getting this information? So that took me down lots of internet rabbit holes, and I'm sharing with you what I've learned since then about those sources that kind of trained the ChatGPT. So just to kind of like give some background, OpenAI is the organization that created ChatGPT, but it has gotten a lot of criticism that it's not so open. And it has been very, the criticism centers around the lack of transparency about what it's been trained on. So this was a good tweet thread. Again, I have a list of references I'll share. A lot of good conversation on Twitter has been happening. But this former history professor and now vice president at a tech company, Nomic AI, had a good Twitter thread about the lack of transparency and how big a problem that was for us to be relying on this source. And I think that, you know, the criticism centers around that, but also what biases might be built on that, you know, that unknown set of sources it's been trained on. So I'm sorry I don't have the secret list, but I do want to share a little bit about what we've discovered about what it may be trained on. So this is from the media coverage and OpenAI's technical documentation. So we know that ChatGPT has been trained on something called the
I have a
Common Crawl data. Sorry, there's the Common Crawl and Web Text 2 data sets. So basically, I think of this as it's hoovered up the internet, everything publicly accessible on the internet. Although they've done a lot to kind of, I think, curate what that was exactly. Then it's been included in their documentation that Wikipedia, English language Wikipedia, was one of the sources it was trained on. Reddit, so posts particularly that have had some upvotes, 3 upvotes or more. And then in their documentation, they have this mystery generic mention that Book Corpora 1 and Book Corpora 2 were part of their training sources. So these are presumably some texts from different genres, some open book repositories, which we'll talk a little bit more about. So I want to kind of list off the maybe sources. So my colleague Will Shaw and I was asking him, what are the sources for this? And we started investigating and asking ChatGPT what its sources were. Sorry, I'll go back. And I will say that we'll get to it in a minute, but ChatGPT is known to hallucinate. So that's why I'm putting the maybe here. We don't actually know if it trained on these sources because it's not always truthful. So I have found from ChatGPT 3 to 4 that it becomes a little bit more reliable, and in ChatGPT 4, it's suddenly pleading the fifth when I ask it what it's trained on and saying that specific details of the sources it used for training are not available. So what I have found that it's ChatGPT 3 said is that it searched article databases like PubMed, Archive, Project Muse, that it has searched some open book digitized libraries like Open Library, HathiTrust, Project Gutenberg, possibly Google Books. I had a long conversation with it about Google Books. I kind of assumed that it cannot get the proprietary copyrighted material from Google Books. And then it was likely trained on these major corpuses, so these sort of word collections that give sample texts from a variety of genres and types of language. And these are often used for language models. And so those are likely part of what it was trained on. And then it also told me that it was trained on something called NewsCrawl, which is a subset of the scraping the internet. So taking information from news sites social media sites, and then something called open subtitles, which were subtitles from movies, TV shows, and the like. So again, I can't verify that these exact sources were things that it was able to train on, but we definitely can assume that anything publicly available, it likely had access to things like abstracts, metadata for scholarly articles, for books, and that it has been able to scrape a lot of scholarly material from the internet, because we know that that is out there. I think it's important to know how ChatGPT uses those sources. So when I asked ChatGPT 4 about its use of sources, it says that it's not able to access or search copyrighted or paywalled content on demand, which we kind of could assume that it's not going to be able to access that material. But it's important for a user to know the full text of a lot of content is not publicly available. And then another important thing, it mentions that it, instead of sort of regurgitating copyrighted works or paywalled content, it instead synthesizes the patterns and knowledge it has gained from those various sources to generate human-like text. And I think this is probably the most important thing, is that the LLM, the large language model, is looking for patterns, facts, and data points within its training data, and giving you responses based on what is not like a search engine works, where it just gives you information. It's kind of compiling information from data points and massive amounts of text. I like this quote from Steven Pinker, who's a psychologist. He wrote this in the Harvard Gazette. He said, with an ordinary writer, you could ask the person and track down the references, but in an LLM, a fact is smeared across billions of tiny adjustments to quantitative variables, and it's impossible to trace and verify a source. And this really gets to the big issue with using ChatGPT for information, is that facts and specific information are not what it's presenting. It's kind of compiling language from the text sources. Now, again, I'll say this is my understanding of it. It's very confusing to me. It's a whole new way of interacting with information, but I've read a lot of takes that people really need to understand how large language models work to understand the outputs. Again, in other words, this is not a search engine, and it's not like any of those search tools that we've ever used before. So it's not a walking, talking Wikipedia, and we need to kind of learn new language and other ways for thinking about what its strengths and limitations might be. And I will mention that just last week, OpenAI said that they have started partnerships with third-party plugins so that it actually can browse up-to-date content on the internet. Prior to, we knew it was based on only data to 2021. And so these new third-party sites like Wolfram Alpha, Expedia, Instacart may be appearing in ChatGPT results, allowing the ChatGPT to connect to like live real-time internet. And I've had a lot of questions about, and this has all moved so fast, even since I started putting this presentation together, that ChatGPT 4 came out. And so I wanted to kind of respond, at least, this is the actual documentation from OpenAI about ChatGPT 4, which is their, evolved version of this that has been said to be much better. And they say, despite its capabilities, it maintains a tendency to make up facts, to double down on incorrect information, and to perform tasks incorrectly. Care should be taken when using the outputs of GPT-4, particularly in contexts where reliability is important. So it's fascinating to read their documentation. I encourage you to do that. But I think they are still very clear that this is not perfect yet. They have said that it's ChatGPT 4 as opposed to the previous version is 40% more likely to produce factual responses than GPT-3. So progress, right? But 40%, that's not perfect. And I've found that the citation hallucinations are better, but they're still there and they're still a big problem. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of switch gears into thinking about how students might be using this after we've kind of thought about the context for what it is. So as a librarian, I am very curious about this, and I've been talking to students as much as I can about how they're using it. So I wanted to first mention that I like this graphic as I think about being a librarian at this day and age, that getting information off the internet is like taking a drink from a fire hydrant. And that's a quote from Mitchell Kapoor, a software developer. I think that the issue of information overload is very real for students as it is for us. There are millions of new articles published a year, not to mention the volume of news, social media content, entertainment that we're encountering every day. And I think that the sort of simple, straightforward nature of ChatGPT is very attractive and appealing to students, as it is for myself. If I could just have this one tool that would do everything for me. And so they're potentially going to be very high users of this. I also wanted to just say that I think that ChatGPT is a nice and helpful, affirming and available search, tool for people. And I went as an example and said, I'm a student athlete writing a paper on the social media pros and cons and NIL deals. This is a topic I had a couple students work on. I said, could you provide me with some keywords and scholarly sources on this topic? And immediately ChatGPT generates a response and says, that's a very timely and relevant topic. And here are some potential places you could go for looking for more information. So I think that difference between what it gives you and what a search engine gives you or a library database, it's just a very different experience and something that's potentially very appealing and helpful for students to have that kind of feedback and that, person that's always there in your browser helping you. Sorry, I wanted to mention that for now in parentheses here, so ChatGPT 3 is publicly available. GPT-4 is not unless you have the Plus account. And I do think it's very worth noting that while students might have access to it right now, they are certainly looking to monetizing this, and it may not be a tool we can count on everyone having access to going forward. So I just wanted to give some examples of ways students would use this. So finding sources on a topic. This is what I would say is the ugly of ChatGPT. So I was doing a library session for first year writing class here at Duke. And the theme was around food and how the cultural, social history of food. So I came up with a sample topic and it was about pig pickins, which is something my family participates in, the kind of a barbecue, Southern barbecue. And so I asked ChatGPT, what are some scholarly sources for learning about pig pickins in the Southern United States? Thinking about how that's kind of where an undergraduate student is coming from. I've got this topic, I need some scholarly sources. And so I posed that to ChatGPT 3 and it rattled off a nice numbered list of sources, which all sounded amazing. They were very relevant. They gave me a little summary. They gave me the titles and the authors. And then as I started to look up, every single one of them was fake. None of them existed. And it was kind of blowing my mind in terms of being a librarian and being given this list of sources that I could not find anywhere. And it led me to understanding a little bit more about the hallucination problem that ChatGPT has and is a very real thing for us all to know about. So hallucinations are not new. People have been talking about them as the major issue with ChatGPT. And I want to say that why this happens is that in the absence of any backing data, AI, ChatGPT will just make stuff up. It will kind of mash together bits of information that it can get and present you with what it thinks you want as citations, but they're not actually real things. And it's particularly deceptive, I think, because, when has that ever happened? I mean, it now does on the internet with as much misinformation as we have, but this idea that there could just be these like very plausible, attractive sources that I might want to check out, and then none of them exist. And ChatGPT for me has never said, I'm sorry, I don't have enough information, or I don't know. It always presents you with something. And so it can be dangerous when it's something is stuff that it's made up. And I would say that there have been some advancements between ChatGPT 3 and 4. It makes up not as many fake citations, but in my testing, I have found that it definitely still has an issue with making up citations when you prompt it. There's a good tweet thread from David Smerdon. I won't go into the details, but he kind of walks you through how ChatGPT is faking citations, how that is happening, because the authors are authors on the topic typically, and the articles and journals may sound legit, but it's kind of mashing those all together and to create the fake citations, which is why that's happening. So I encourage you to check out some of these resources I'll share at the end. Just to kind of go forward on another type of task a student might have with research, creating a literature review. This is kind of a standard process for students and researchers writing papers. I have found that in my example, ChatGPT 4 is slightly better. So I wrote a question, can you write me a college level literature review on the impacts of ChatGPT on disinformation? It immediately wrote like basically a page worth of literature review. It gave it, many people have talked about how kind of bland and general its writing is. And I found this the case to be for this literature review. It calls it the impact of ChatGPT on disinformation, a literature review. And I will say that in version 4, it does tend to give in-text citations, and 3, it didn't. But I suspect the hallucination problem might be the case for, like, we can't verify that what it's saying is the landscape of the literature on a topic is actually that, since we know that it can make stuff up. So I would say huge amount of caution in terms of using this for a literature review, but I would say a student might try to do this, and it's something that ChatGPT will give a response to. Summarizing a source. So I really hadn't thought of this use case, and I was asking a student that said he was using ChatGPT, and he said that he was using it to summarize articles. So if he had some readings for class, you can, paste in a citation to ChatGPT and say, could you give me the highlights or the key takeaways of this article? And I hadn't thought of that use, and it makes sense. Students have a lot to do. Reading is tough. These scholarly articles can be very dense. But I will say that, sorry, one second. I'll say that it is kind of like a Cliff Notes for readings, but what we know about ChatGPT makes us want to be very cautious about how well it can synthesize the key points of scholarly or research publications. I asked another AI chatbot, Claude, about ChatGPT and whether it would do a good job of synthesizing scientific articles. And Claude told me that while it can provide simple summaries, it's not high quality or comprehensive. And the issues are that it does not have a deep understanding of the content of the arguments in the articles. It summarizes based on statistical patterns and language rather than an actual comprehension or synthesis of the article. And it tends to pick out and repeat key phrases from the article rather than synthesizing the concepts. So I think we can all see why this is a problem. But we can also think about how for a student who doesn't really understand how ChatGPT works, they might, think that this could be a way to help them in reading scientific literature, research literature. Next, I kind of tested some things around how ChatGPT would do for creating a search strategy, which is something librarians help students with, especially if they're doing kind of a comprehensive search, how they can use different search strategies and databases to find better information. So I found that for novices, this is my ChatGPT script where I asked it for help with a search strategy on disinformation and ChatGPT. And it did a pretty good job of explaining some basic search strategies to me that I found were helpful. And it even kind of gave me a search string using Boolean logic. And for a novice, I would say it's okay. But I will say, I know there may be some folks from kind of clinical medical areas here, people that do comprehensive searches, evidence syntheses, systematic reviews, scoping reviews. And ChatGPT should not be relied on for being able to create a systematic search. It will hallucinate medical subject headings. It will mess up the syntax of the search string. And it just really can't handle the kind of sophisticated thinking that a search strategy would require. So definitely use your human librarians for those tasks still. And we're moving into the good category. So finding specific databases, if a student were to prompt ChatGPT for suggestions of databases and sources, which they'd have to know that a database exists to even ask that. But I found when I asked it for suggestions of databases to search on in my topic disinformation ChatGPT, it listed off what I think as a librarian, a pretty good list of databases beyond Google. So these are all databases I think would be very appropriate for this topic. And I often would see it say, and check with your library. So I appreciated that kind suggestion from ChatGPT. But again, a student would need to know to ask this as opposed to just using Google for everything. And then I did read a study from the Journal of Global Health where the researchers were testing out ChatGPT to help with assistance on suggestions for their study design and data analysis. And this is the article, again, it'll be in the references. And they found that it actually did a really good job of helping once they gave it some prompts about the nature of their data set and asked it for guidance on what data analysis approaches they would take. They did find it useful there. This was kind of a meta article where they were experimenting with this. But then they said they also asked it to create a literature review and it made up sources. So I thought that was interesting. There are some kind of studies coming out now about how people are using this. And lastly, on the very good front, I find that ChatGPT is great for generating topic ideas or keywords. Again, not for an expert search, but for somebody that's kind of trying to figure out what could I write about? What could I research? And I will show you that it did not create this visualization, I did, but I asked it for some keywords related to the topic of disinformation, and it immediately kind of generated what I think are really, interesting concepts and terms that if I were a student, I would be kind of inspired. I would have some new ideas about what I might research. And I think this really is important to note that much like a writer's block, people can really experience research blocks where they think of a word or a topic, but they don't know if it's a good idea. And it can be kind of anxiety inducing to figure out how to go forward with the research. So ChatGPT has generative in its name. It is very good at generating keywords and ideas. And I think it can be a really inspiring tool to use for that type of inquiry. Okay, so those are just my examples, again, based on things that I think students might use it for, in addition to a lot of conversations I've had with students about how they're using it. I wanted to kind of quickly talk about potential harms and benefits. Hopefully I've kind of touched on some here that might be on your mind. And I think my polls aren't working very well. So just add to the chat based on what we've talked about, or you can use the poll if you want to. What's a major concern that you have around the use of ChatGPT for research or information seeking? So either something you've been thinking about, something I've touched on, just wanted to get some ideas. You can stick it in the chat or in the poll. Curious to hear what concerns you have. All right, so I'm seeing English language bias, truthful information, social bias. That students won't read. Misinformation, definitely. Great. I think there's definitely a lot that we're all trying to work through, and that's partly what we're doing today, is just learning more about how it works and thinking about how we can help students kind of and ourselves overcome some of ChatGPT's limitations. So I'm going to move on. What you've shared is kind of, I was reading the ChatGPT 4 documentation, again, a fascinating read. And they highlight in that documentation what their safety concerns are. They provide details on how they're testing it and how they're working to improve those safety challenges, some of which mirror what we've been talking about and some of the ideas you shared about your concerns. I pulled out 4 of, I don't know, I think there were 10 safety challenges they were facing. But I pulled out the 4 that I think are most relevant for information seeking with ChatGPT. So we've talked about the hallucinations, obviously a huge challenge, that ChatGPT will just make up nonsensical content that is very plausible, or might make someone think that it's real when it's not. Another safety challenge they talk about is disinformation, which some of you put in the chat or the poll there. So that ChatGPT might be used to generate misleading content. And I think for bad actors, you can definitely go to ChatGPT and say, write me a tweet or an essay, or anything, basically an email that convinces people that they should take ivermectin if they have COVID-19 or whatever it is. And ChatGPT can kind of present a prompt, present a way of sharing that misinformation. And so it could become a tool for people who may already be spreading misinformation, but it just kind of gives people another way of creating content that is pretty scary. And then I found this really interesting. They highlight that over-reliance is a safety challenge. I find last week when ChatGPT went down, I was feeling my my withdrawal symptoms, that once you start using it, you kind of depend on it and trust it. And that in terms of the safety challenge there, if students are using it for writing help, or just they're exploring it, they may become like very used to it being helpful in one area, and then they start using it for, say, looking for sources. And that's where they may not really realize the issue it has with inaccuracies around information, and they'll may not be aware of its limitations. And then lastly, I just want to mention probably the elephant in the room, I think, with ChatGPT is the safety challenge of privacy. And the really recent example is that last week, I'll go to the next slide. There was an outage with ChatGPT, and part of the reason was that users were seeing other people's search histories in their interface for ChatGPT. So there was a lot of tweets and posts about how people were starting to see like somebody else's chat history come into their platform. And so it really highlights how little people are really aware of the privacy implications of participating in the ChatGPT platform. We're giving it tons of data, millions of people are going and using this thing and kind of inputting lots of information. But we are not really thinking a whole lot about the privacy implications there. So I want to just kind of end a little bit on some benefits, and I hope that there are benefits that you see, because I'm talking to you today because I'm very excited about the potential of this tool or ones like it for helping facilitate research. And I think that idea that it could potentially accelerate research is a really big deal, and something many of you have been thinking about, and perhaps already taking advantage of AI in your own research. And so another thing that I think that is a huge benefit is how it could potentially level the playing field. So I mentioned the idea of a student who might experience research block and really have some good things that came out of using ChatGPT to get ideas or get curious about something. I've also read a lot about how ChatGPT is being used by non-native English speakers to kind of level the playing field for being able to assist them with communicating and working on their research, because ChatGPT can do some really amazing things for non-native English speakers in terms of helping them identify areas of weakness in their writing and that sort of thing. Again, generating new ideas and just kind of facilitating creativity. I think the tool itself just has endless applications, and when people start playing with it, they can really see some different potential uses for it, that some things that will help their research or themselves personally. And just quickly, I want to go through a couple ways to keep up, and then hopefully it looks like we might have a little bit of time to answer questions or have people speak up about what they're seeing. So just how to keep up. I've been monitoring and seeing how the scholarly publishing is coming out around ChatGPT. So in PubMed, 150 results came back when I searched last week. Google Scholar, there's a lot more, although that's kind of a inflated number probably. And then in searching just on the web, there's obviously tons of news and tech journalism and blog and social media content coming out on this topic. So that's where it's almost overwhelming how much is out there now. But I'm really encouraged to see scholars and academics, putting out pieces, doing some research on how this ChatGPT is being used in their work. So some ways to keep up. I think it's super important to play with ChatGPT, especially even here today. We have people from such different perspectives and disciplines. And if you play with it and kind of see how it responds when you ask it to summarize an article you're super familiar with, maybe even something you wrote, and seeing how ChatGPT does with that type of prompt, that's super important, because the more we know about how it responds to different types of questions and different disciplines, the more we can help educate people about what's missing there. I'd also think it's super important for us to talk to students and colleagues. For me, that was my go-to first thing, is how are they using it? What do they think about it? And I think in higher education, we really need to know where our new generations of students are coming from. And I think it's very clear that we'll have students who are already using it, and then incoming students that have used it in high school and have varying levels of knowledge about it. So I think it's really important to be talking and ideally gathering, research data around how people are using it. And then, of course, reading and listening and attending events like this one and others that Duke Learning Innovation has planned. There's just a lot of really good content out there right now, lots of good events and webinars. So just paying attention to what folks are talking about is a really good next step. if you're here at Duke, there's a staff AI Teams channel that I joined where I've seen a lot of really good updates and kind of links shared there. So if you're at Duke, you might want to check that out. It's called Staff AI. And then lastly, I think this is my plug. It's really important for us to kind of embrace and advocate for AI and algorithm literacy. I think I don't yet have the vocabulary for what this thing is and what it can do. And so I'm learning. And I think it's clear to me that it's something that's going to be very, very important for research, education going forward. And so we really need to think about how we're going to talk about it with students, how we're going to think about its implications for society at large, and to be really trying to learn as much as we can. And I hope that universities will think about how to incorporate it, particularly around the ethics of using it, which I know is a topic many of you are likely interested in. So I think if students know how to use the tool, and if we know how to use the tool, we'll be way more likely to use it wisely. So again, I have a whole list of references. This slide deck will be shared out for anyone that registered for this event. And so I've mentioned and kind of glossed over some sources I've used to help my learning in this, and that's included here in the bibliography. If I also have really been enjoying this podcast, Hard Fork. I don't know if you all have been listening to it, but it's got some really good coverage on some of the kind of technology and the impacts of it. So I talked very fast, but I would like to thank you all for coming, and hopefully we do have about 10 minutes for questions. If folks would like to stick around and ask questions, you can do so by unmuting and asking or putting it in the chat. I'll stop sharing my screen just so I can get a better view of folks and see the chat myself. So thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. We really appreciate it. There's a lot of important information in there. I do want to see the sources because I know your sources are real. A lot of the things that came through the chat are people sharing more resources on also other AI tools that do things like summarize articles that I had never heard about. That's great. I'm trying to see if there's any outstanding questions. Something that did come up that I don't know if you can speak to or not is AI detection tools like Zero GPT. I don't know if you're really gone into that area. From our perspective in learning innovation, AI is moving so quickly that it's nearly impossible for those tools to keep up. Also, their fail rate on what they detect as human versus computer generated is too high to feel comfortable to me anyway. And I don't know if you have any thoughts like that.
Yeah, I haven't spent that much with the detection tools. I kind of understand that's like sort of the from my point of view, I like to think of ChatGPT positively in the way we're talking about it instead of punitively, and how we're going to catch all those cheating students. So I haven't really explored that kind of that world. And as a librarian, I'm not the plagiarism police. I'm not even the copyright police. I'm just kind of supporting students from where they are. And I do get that this is a real issue for academic integrity and all of the many serious reasons we need to be thinking about its impact. But I myself have not dabbled in trying to understand how well those tools work. I think about turnitin.com being the kind of predecessor of, oh, students are grabbing text off the internet and plagiarizing. Well, yes, the internet has been around a long time, and some of this stuff, the hype maybe is a little bit inflated, since we've already experienced many different ways for students to cheat. That's my little bit of a cynical take. Sorry, I'm scrolling through the chat too to see if I see anything.
And if anyone wants to go ahead and unmute at this point, if they have any final thoughts or questions. Obviously, from the chat, everyone is deeply engaged in trying to figure this out as much as we are.
Yeah, there was a good point about couldn't ChatGPT kind of flag in their platform that the sources may not be real or reliable. I think they're definitely keenly interested in kind of, they've heard that criticism about the fake sources and they're trying to improve it. But I honestly, this is where my like tech knowledge is not where it needs to be. But if it is a large language model, I don't see how it will ever not be able to do some of that, where it's kind of mashing together words and creating kind of responses that aren't based in it being able to comprehend texts or sources or anything like that. I could be proven wrong.
Hey, and it's Steve Toback. I just wanted to comment on that specifically. I think when you see things like Bing incorporating ChatGPT and you have the combination of search and the large language models, I think hopefully that will start to do that. Like it can, now that it's attached to a search, it can actually go out and see what sources there are. And there are some tools out there that will generate something with actual sources using a combination of web search and large language model at the same time. So that's what I'm most excited about is seeing those come together and seeing what Google does with that as well. So I think that's going to be a big change.
Yeah, I kind of assumed that the hallucinations, especially around citations, would be something that would eventually in new models. In fact, it's better in 4. And now with the kind of, the applications that connect to the internet, that they can resolve that and kind of mash together a search engine and a generative tool for folks. And I think that desire to have one tool that can do all of the things is very appealing to people. And whichever one of these companies can make that happen reliably and quickly will certainly be something to watch. I think I'm impressed with Bing AI in that when you do ask it for stuff, it provides footnotes to the sources. So you, instead of ChatGPT where you just get a block of text not knowing where any of it's coming from, Bing AI at least gives you the footnotes, which is more familiar to me if I'm relying on it for anything. But it's not quite as fun to play with, I think, as ChatGPT.
Hi, Dan Mandeville here, University of Washington. I'm the librarian for linguistics and support the computational linguistics program here. So this whole topic has really been interesting to me, though my tech knowledge is not up to where it needs to be to get all of this. I just wonder, it really seems to me that this tool, with writing being its strength and kind of general knowledge over more like specific knowledge, it really seems to me like this is a place where librarians can intervene, as you highlighted, in kind of that research block. Kind of, I think about library anxiety, information overload, and just how people just want to talk to a computer in natural language. And I think that's just such a huge draw here, is that we know people talk to Google like it's a person anyway. They put in their questions, in full syntax and everything. And so I think that that's really gonna be a big change. But I just wonder if that's where, the big benefit of this could be for us as librarians, is getting students through that kind of exploration stage, that brainstorming stage, that first draft stage. That's where I've been finding that it's been really interesting and helpful for me, even in my own work. And so it just seems natural that students would go there too. They just don't have the same information literacy skills necessarily of an information professional. So that's where my real concern has been. But I really see the usefulness of this as a tool to get students kind of into the process. But it's like our citation managers, you always have to go over what they put out, because it could be, you've got all kinds of stuff you have to clean up. And that's where we're at with this now. I'm sure it will get more sophisticated and nuanced, but right now I really see the parallels with those tools.
Yeah, those are great points. I think I'm also really looking forward to this, like for me as a librarian, I've been doing this for a long time, but this kind of presents an interesting new challenge, and potentially a place for more conversations around AI and like how these tools are working and how they can work well for you if you know how they work. And I think that it is a really good point. I mean, I would love to see students getting to the point where they're excited about the potential ideas that they've come up with, and they're using all the different tools to their advantage and writing more interesting papers for professors, and coming up with ideas that they can explore on their own some, and then, utilizing more advanced or better tools depending on what their need is. So those are some good points. And good to see a fellow librarian from across the nation. Well, I don't know that I've necessarily digested all of the chat, but it looks like there's been some good conversation there, and appreciate people sharing resources and ideas. As Elise mentioned, she's going to be sharing the slides here. And I would love, like, honestly, if any of you want to connect about a specific thing that we weren't able to talk about, or what your universities, libraries, or departments are doing, I would be happy to, get in touch with me or Elise, and we can kind of get people connected. There's some really good thinking on these topics, and I think the energy is a good thing, and we should kind of keep moving forward with that and seeing where this goes.
And I'll jump in one more time to say, thank you, Hannah. Well done.
Yeah, thank you. The folks with computer science knowledge are like, you forgot all this other stuff. And I definitely think it's a learning process, but appreciate people's attention.
Have a good rest of your Monday, everyone.
All right. See y'all.